I'm Richard Smith. I'm the research director at IINN, and obviously I was tapped for this month's rounds presentation. And I wanted to talk about a little bit about it's a kind of research. It's a kind of an approach to doing research studies. It's something that is done on a large scale by large scale funding organizations and organizations that do big things, like, for example, the military has large programs in this kind of work, as do things like NIH and the National Institute of Medicine. Basically, comparative effectiveness research is a means of testing one modality against another modality for the treatment of something. So it's not what you might think if you were like developing a drug or a device where you want to see how well it works against itself. You want to compare efficacy against no treatment at all. In this case, you're comparing efficacy and safety in many cases, in probably most cases, against whatever is the standard of care. So, and for the purpose of doing a study, you'd like the standard of care to be inadequate or not terribly safe, because you just come up with the world-beating method or device or technology or whatever it is, but something you're comparing against that standard of care. So all of the data for this kind of study tend to be centered on patient responses, which is not at all unusual. And this kind of work happens all the time anyway. I mean, just in the course of normal practice. Here we go. So you can, putting it in simple jargon, is what works best. That sort of belies the structure underneath a study like this. But basically, evidence-based medicine, evaluating programs, assessing health technologies, doing cost-effectiveness analysis, all of these fit underneath this rubric. An organization that was recently mandated by Congress and came into existence in 2010, the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, funds very large studies. And I'll tell you about an attempt at getting one of these grants in a little bit. But their studies are typical of this kind of work on a big scale. Not to say that it can't be done on a variety of scales. So this comparative effectiveness research involves clinical health as well as public health. So it might be, for example, ways of treating against schistosomiasis or some other pathogen or nasty creature. A variety of interventions can be studied, from diagnosis through public health, the means of delivering healthcare, the way that healthcare is financed, organized, all of those things that impact the outcome to patients. And all of the comparisons are based on the health of the patients. The study methods can be any of the kinds of things you might imagine, from observational studies to developing models for the recovery time and kinetics and things like that. Randomized trials that everybody's pretty familiar with. In public health, this started off with the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act in 2009, which initially impacted Veterans Affairs, because obviously that's a huge number of people for whom they have a lot of medical records. So it's possible to work with them as a group and then dice them out into subgroups based on indications and other things. The National Institute of Aging and the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, which is part of Health and Human Services. So the aim of all of this, as stated in a recent article, to assist consumers, clinicians, purchasers, and policymakers in the kinds of decisions that they will make to improve healthcare at the local, individual population levels. So the kinds of design elements you would see in comparative effectiveness research could be interventional with a drug or device or any other intervention. You can have randomized subject allocation is common. It may or may not be blinded depending on the requirements of the study. You might have to know that somebody is wearing corrective lenses or not, for example. The primary purpose of it is treatment, and they only really focus on significant medical conditions. conditions. They don't seem to do any rare diseases. Partly because this is funded by tax dollars in large part, which means that all of us are contributing in some way, and they want to be able to spread the benefits along with the obligations, if you will.
Is it only Medicare patients that they fund, like in terms of studies?
No, they'll fund studies for. They would fund a study for patients at a hospital or a research center. They tend to be multiple hospitals. For example, I saw one from the University of Pittsburgh where they were collaborating with 12 hospitals, and so you have a university center, which is kind of gives it that sheen of educational everything. But all of the hospitals have physicians working where each one of them is consenting patients to the study, and that didn't involve Medicare or VA necessarily. So this is obviously really big in the Veterans Administration because it's sort of a captive population in a way. You have over 8 million veterans currently enrolled in these studies. They don't necessarily have a lot of options to do it. I guess they kind of do it because it's, in a way, expected of them, and they can also see some potential benefits from them. But the VA has a strong research culture. Another advantage there is that there's little fee for service. There are a lot of benefits to veterans, so it makes it easier for people to volunteer for something knowing that out-of-pocket is going to be minimal. And there's a huge amount of diversity in the VA, with over 150 hospitals and over 90,000 providers. So they have a lot of flexibility in what they can do, a lot of breadth there. But there are a lot of challenges at the same time. You have complex issues, obviously, with veterans. Think about PTSD and other sort of veteran-focused kinds of conditions. It can be very difficult. But you have similar critical choices. You have to select what you think is best for the patient, consider the benefits and harms of the treatment, and you would do that in study design as well. And the need to provide the best individual treatment, which having a large patient population, you can kind of average it out. The business about benefits and harms is largely taken up in the fact that this is comparing different treatments that are intended to treat the same condition or disease or whatever. So typically in that situation, you might have something that is current standard of practice and something else that came up along the way that is looking very promising for a large population. And very promising could be lower side effects. It could be any number of things.
But the elephant in that critical choices is also the cost. Like, I know that they want to study all this other stuff, it seems, but the other issue is what's the cost of doing it?
It's pretty high, but they have the budget for that.
Well, not the study, but I'm saying for treatment. Like, that's the other thing that affects whether or not we give treatment. It might be a better treatment, but it's so expensive that the answer is no. Like, in other words, there's no one's willing to pay for that.
Right, and it could turn out that if a treatment, sort of semi-contrary to that, that if a treatment is proven to be effective, maybe sufficient numbers of patients come along that you can amortize costs over a broader number. But yeah, that's definitely an issue. I don't know to what extent they really focus on the cost of treatment. And I haven't gotten to the bottom. I've only been looking at this for about 3 weeks, so I don't know everything that they do. So as an example of a current study with veterans with PTSD, they looked at 900 veterans, compared 2 different kinds of psychotherapy, typical comparative effectiveness. One was called prolonged exposure, which involved re-experiencing and re-engaging things that caused PTSD, or the situation itself. The other called cognitive processing, in which the practitioner would work with the veteran and try to understand and maybe reverse some of the negativity that is brought up by images and ideas and recollections in the past. So, and this is a study that is continuing, so there's no data that I could find on it just yet. In another recent VA study, they were looking at 4 different potencies of smoked marijuana for veterans with treatment-resistant PTSD. And this, again, is currently enrolling, so there's no data on it. And just the idea of using marijuana for treatment, it's not surprising that there's no data because this is a pretty new thing. What they're looking at is 4 different potencies. It's double-blind, randomized, and they have a crossover assignment, so patients are swapping groups without knowing which group they're in because it's blinded. It's double-blinded, so the practitioners don't either. So that's the kind of study that they will support. Here are some examples of others. I just pulled these as a list out of a list of many. Anticoagulation clinic where they're looking at intensive home monitoring against requiring patients to go to the clinic. Robotic assisted training. This was a 3-arm study. They like to do as many arms as possible because that way everybody's controlling for everybody else. This is all training for people with upper extremity issues, one robotic assisted, one with using practitioners doing intensive stretching and so forth, and the other one, whatever the usual care is in stroke patients. And then they have a diabetes study and something for localized management of localized prostate cancer. So they're kind of all over the map in the things that they look at. Although I haven't seen any dental studies yet, so who knows? I'm not sure that it's that critical for the military. So this organization itself, PCORI, PCORI was authorized in 2010. They started funding studies in 2012. And their little tagline is they fund studies to determine which healthcare options work best for which patients. So they want to have large enough studies that they can advise in these critical decisions. And then, unlike most of the clinical research things that I've done, which has been looking at a drug or a device or whatever and saying, how well does it work against not using it, you're doing it against a standard. There's a comparator in many of these things. So it's not advocacy per se. So I have if I can get this video, this is just one of the investigators who's gotten, where's the cursor? Oh, there he is. Hopefully this will come up. This is like a 1 minute and 20-second interview with an investigator who works with grants from this organ that tells you what he's up to. Don't know about volume though.
I've been doing research for decades now, but doing work that was funded by PCORI with its emphasis on stakeholder engagement has really been a meaningful change in the quality of the research that we're doing. By engaging patients and other stakeholders in the research process, we are making an active effort to try to address questions that matter to them, measure outcomes that are meaningful to them, and engage them in the process of trying to find solutions. For years, researchers have lamented the fact that they can't get the community engaged in their research, or they can't get patients engaged in their research. And what I've discovered through this experience is we've got the question 180 degrees backward. We need to get researchers engaged in what communities are doing. We need to find ways to make research relevant to the work that patients do and that communities do to improve their health.
So, oh, okay. Yes.
Go down to the bottom. Look at this one.
Here?
The bottom of it, the whole page.
The whole page.
Yep, it goes towards the side. Yep, just push down.
Okay.
But you want to go down
Go
to
down
here?
so we can have
Oh.
PowerPoint.
They're way too mean. They are, I want to get to it.
This is the PowerPoint though?
Wait,
Dr.
we're
Smith?
using PowerPoint or we're using
Yes, it was off the PowerPoint. Yeah, that slide was
a hyperlink from the PowerPoint. Yeah, it's up here, but it's not playing. There it goes.
We're working with and how large one has to appear. It's kind of, if you're giving a stereo of a sister, you might shine a flashlight behind you in the daytime to make it bigger, that kind of thing. I didn't realize, really this stuff, but I was looking on their website and I saw something that seemed right on. It would be an appropriate target because we have such a large number of patients who come in with chronic pain, and it's pretty amazing to see them coming in and out. Obviously, the title clinical strategies to manage and reduce long-term opioid use for chronic pain. So all of these things start with a priority research question, and the comparative effectiveness, they want to compare the effectiveness of strategies to reduce opioid use while managing pain at the same time. And the key details of this grant was it was for 3 to 5 years, the maximum total direct cost only of $10 million, total funds available of $19 million, which is pretty awesome numbers. Regarding the scope, they estimate about 100 million Americans suffer from chronic pain, costing about $600 billion a year. So the review criteria for grants from this organization are, first of all, to intentionally study for critical gaps in knowledge. So we have to have evidence. Obviously, the study itself is evidence-driven, and in order to get a grant like this, first of all, you have to identify where the gaps are in knowledge, and you've got to have a treatment modality that will address those gaps directly. And then you have to address how capable it is for study findings to be readily adopted. What the scientific merit this is in terms of research design, analysis, and the outcomes of the study. Some things about the investigator and the environment, which is true for any federally sponsored grant. You have to demonstrate patient-centeredness. That's not so hard to do in a way. It's almost like turning a sentence around, but you have to focus on that thing. And you have to have patient and stakeholder engagement throughout the study. So the problem with opioids, I think everybody here knows probably not more than I do about this, but it's effective in some cases, but it's not terribly effective in controlling chronic non-malignant pain. It has this long sequence of serious side effects. There are a large number of overdoses. In 2014, over 14,000 Americans died of unintentional overdoses of prescription opioids. That doesn't speak of street heroin or any other sorts of these kinds of drugs. And then there are a number of adverse effects that one has to at least monitor and acknowledge.
Not a single death from overdose from marijuana.
Zero.
Not one reported death.
Right.
Of course, if they're driving, but
Right.
from true overdose.
Right.
There's never been reported death.
With the Cheetos, the shit falls on.
But I guess maybe a flip side of that is nobody wants to be the first. So, if I'm the guy's buddy and he's about to die, I'm not going to tell anybody, okay? It would skew the scale completely. Okay, so anyway, I was looking at this and I thought, well, it's a good idea to kind of, have a balanced approach in this and not just, marijuana wasn't the first thing that came to mind in thinking of this. I just kind of went into the literature to try to find some solutions. And I found a study with gabapentin that's very recent, this year, on the literature search with almost 2,000 patients in 17 randomized trials. It's been used preoperatively for neuropathic pain and has a consequence of significant reduction in opioid use and pain. So that sounds like the problem is already solved. And that's before I started finding about some of the serious adverse effects of gabapentin, which, not being a clinician, I really can't speak to how pervasive this is or whatever, but there are a lot of withdrawal issues with it and potential for dependency and overuse. And just kind of thinking about those things made me think, well, there's got to be some better alternative, which is, and kind of in the back of my mind, I was remembering Dr. McAdar's seminar that he gave a couple of months ago, and he was basically describing his alternative solution to this, which is what.
Where did you get that name of rejected solution? Is that just like what you, is that just a name for the
I'm
slide?
sorry, which?
A rejected solution? Is that something? Is that the name of an article that you have there, or is that just the name of the slide?
Rejected solution.
Right
At the very top.
Right at the
Yeah.
top.
Oh no, this is one that I rejected.
Oh, okay.
I looked at it and I thought, well, there's a lot of side effects, there's a lot of complications, and there's not a whole lot of novelty.
But realistically speaking, it's hard to just not give gabapentin. Like you need to give something that's better. So it's really one of the better choices out of a bunch of bad choices. But still, it's better than nothing.
Like gabapentin we use so much.
Right.
When it's been used, I think University of Michigan conducted the first study I remember almost 20 years ago. And we use gabapentin, because as you said, this is a much little better choice.
Right.
In any chronic pain, we use that rather than start going opioids and morphine and other things.
Those choices are kind of things.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. I think this comes down a lot to the physiology as well, because I've seen studies that talk about reduction in opioid use, but opioids and a neuropathic pain agent are treating two different kinds of pain. And so I never really understood how the gabapentin reduces the opioid use, probably because it's actually treating the chronic neuropathic type transmission of nerves, as opposed to opioids, which are treating nociceptive type pain. Like, these are two different physiological processes.
Right.
So I think you're decreasing the opioid use because the gabapentin actually makes the patients feel better. So you don't need all these horrible opioids that are making them feel so poorly because of all the side effects that you alluded to before.
Right.
But like the fact that I think there's still a significant amount of people in the community, especially the pain community, who don't realize that these are two different mechanisms, two different physiological processes, is like somewhat troubling, I think. Sort of keeping you to prescribe more and more opioids when you're just it's not the proper agent to treat that physiological process.
And masks the symptoms.
And the real issue, so it's, on the one hand, you're talking about like actual pain that people are, have and what's best to treat it. The other major elephant in the room is what if the pain's fictitious? What if there's other psychological issues, depression going on, and how do you then like quantify that and ascertain that? That becomes, I think, a major issue. Like, how do we know this patient coming to us is just not making it up? And I think that that's one of those studies that needs to get done, and we're particularly, we're hopefully going to get functional MRI here soon, like in the next couple of weeks. We can also look at the, like the patients and see whether they're literally lying, whether the premotor cortex is generating the answer, or whether it's their memory tracks, the singular tracks. And their hippocampus. So I think we should be able to read that. There's an MRI, a functional MRI called no-lie MRI. 95% accurate, where you can ask a patient a question and then you can start to look. So I would love to, to look at that and see whether or not we can really ascertain whether patients are truly feeling pain or not.
Right, and that's something we could do internally as a study, as a controlled study.
That'll be novel information.
Wait, what is the
Everything
no-lie MRI? What is it?
It's a functional MRI where you put a patient in and the areas that are active will light up. So, when you ask a question, if they're accessing the memory tract, you can say that's probably true. If they're accessing their, prefrontal cortex and they got all these sort of thoughts going through their head, then okay, well, why is that going crazy?
Is that something we can do downstairs? I'm sorry.
Yes. Yeah.
Fine.
That
So
is-
we're almost there with that. We're almost there. The software is going to be downloaded. We'll see what hardware requirements there are. So we're pretty close to having it installed.
Joel, I can send a patient to see if it's really
Exactly.
That would be good to do because in private care world or internist world, I mean, we have our own way to determine if this patient is really, you ask the patient and also is the only medication that works and everything else is allergic to, and this pain was there for like motor vehicle accident 15 years ago, and he's never been very good pain. So those kind of things, and you say, you know what, no, this is not a legit patient, or this is so, but this is a high-tech thing.
Well,
It's something.
it didn't hold up in court. It's been done But the problem is those chronic gliders. Like they can make their brain really well. And then that they can generate an idea that becomes a memory pretty quickly. So these guys that are sophisticated, they're going to get out just like lie detector guys.
But at least you
can
can
be defeated.
detect. I don't know how. Do they tell you how many people you can at least clean out?
Well, it's 94% effective.
That's pretty good.
In producing, getting the right answer. But I think that it's so expensive to do that I believe we're going to start gathering that over the next few years. And then using it here and then saying, okay, well, you went to the MRI and your pain center didn't light up, your prefrontal cortex lighted up, your memory center didn't wake up whatsoever. So, and we're asking you, are you selling the drugs? So everything went crazy except your advances. And so those are the types of things I'd love to get engaged in. And see what happens, like, from there. But it's just another tool, I think. I don't think that'll be the answer. But 94% is pretty high rate of detecting an honest answer.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
And with time, I think it's better to get. But we're hopefully, like, literally, if it could happen today, it's really just a matter of downloading and getting the it's expensive. So, but then no one's going to pay for it. There'll be no here to pay for it. But I think that, through a Picori study or something, it'll be worth doing it. Just to, and plus, because we have the infrastructure, it's not really impactful.
One more point I just wanted to say real quick, Richard, is the reason why we use the gabapentin is, I mean, obviously significant reduction of the opioid use, but the primary reason why we want to reduce opioids is, not only the addiction, but the deaths that are associated with overdose of the opioids and respiratory depression. So that's why we go to gabapentin, as an alternative to the opioids, despite some of these other complications.
Thank you. No, that's. No, I think that these are all really great points. I'm glad to see that we're developing the means to go beyond all of this internally, and we can collect data and do whatever, do controlled clinical studies with this kind of thing. So, anyway, in my lack of knowledge and training in this field, I kind of stopped looking around for other things besides gabapentin, and I wasn't sure how why anybody would use it because I saw all these negatives. I thought, let's try something else. And I remember Dr. Nakadar's presentation. Oops, need this
You
one.
can project the solution off that slide just by
So So then I thought, well, maybe medical cannabis would be an appropriate agent to use. Advantages are that we have tons of study subjects available here. We can do outcome comparisons. It's a low-risk intervention. We have patients here. We have Dr. Nakadar. We have other modalities that can be used as well for treatment of pain. I wasn't sure how to make this big enough. So rather than spreading it around to other institutions, I thought let's go down a path of increasing the numbers of modalities that we have. So I thought physical therapy would be appropriate. I did talk to Eric about this a little bit. And clinical psychology, there are some local clinical psychologists around who would be able to do this.
What's the size of the grant you applied for?
I'm sorry?
How much did you apply
Oh,
for?
well, look, I have a slide on that.
Or you
So the study outline that I came up with would involve consenting 4,000 patients. And these patients would have to be taking greater than 80 pill equivalents of opioids per day. And basically they would be divided into four cannabis treatment groups. A 0, some low level, an intermediate level, and a high level per day. And they would all be blinded. The levels of, I presume, THC. I don't know, I asked about Dr. Nakadar about CBD, and it wasn't clear to me what. When I see in the literature people say they both have some efficacy, and I don't know how the decisions are made in that. I was relying on his expertise for this. So out of those 4, they would be divided into treatment with or without physical therapy, with or without a clinical psychologist. So I was assuming that we would have about 50% attrition and wind up with about 250 patients per group. And this again, the goal of this is not to submit a grant proposal. It was to submit a letter of intent. That's the first thing. That's the thing that has to become approved before they'll ask for the next thing. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry about that. Okay, so here's the thing. It has the dollars on it. The study would be proposed for 5 years with patients being consented for 3. We'd wind up in the end with 4,000 patients with about 52,000 data sets. And the budget worked out to a total of, this would be the total direct 4.6 million and estimated, I asked Amy, but there's no flat indirect cost rate here, so I guesstimated 40%. It's probably higher than that. So the total budget is 6.4 million. So I wrote up this letter of intent, but unfortunately I didn't have enough time to get it in.
I don't know if you're interrupting, but you're saying $30 for a site visit and $30 for PT, physical therapy? That's how much you're putting into the grant for PT?
I didn't have time to ask people for numbers. I was pulling them out of the clinic. I said, "Can I have 2 minutes?" I didn't get 2.5 minutes.
$30 for PT is like go bankrupt.
Well, there's nothing for. That would be to pay for the direct cost of the physical therapy. There's no overhead. Overhead to IINN would come out down here
I see, because you're talking about for the therapist.
for the therapist.
And you're saying $30 per hour or.
Yeah, whatever the period is. Yeah, that was just a placeholder, so I had nothing else to go by. And I was grateful for the couple of minutes that I got.
Yeah, and you would probably be able to do even better estimates. And you could pretty detailed with something like what's their actual cost.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. And I imagine even what the treatments are, which again I'm ignorant of.